Hope you had a good lunch. My name is Jaap Vos. I'm going to make a couple of disclaimers. I'm going to talk about the Dutch approach to bicycle infrastructure design. But when I was preparing for this talk, I realized that in the last year and a half or so, a lot of things have changed in Dutch policy with regard to bikes. So besides talking about infrastructure, I'm also going to talk about some of the policy issues that they now have to deal with that I don't think we have to deal with yet, but there are still things that I think we should start thinking about. So some other things. I'm Dutch, little disclaimer, right? So probably biased. I biked since I was 3 years old. My first bike was a tiny little blue bike. And I remember when I was 6 years old, I had to bike to school, and that was 6 miles one way. And that was not a big deal. The only thing I like better than biking as a good Dutchman is skating. And yes, I do like raw herring. All right. So now that you know all this about me, let's talk a little bit about the Dutch and bikes. So the average Dutch person uses a bike about 300 times a year. Right? So if you think about 365 days, 300 times a year, we're actually on that bike. The average bike ride is about 7 kilometers, so that's about 4.5 to 5 miles. That's kind of the typical Dutch person, the distance that they will bike. 27% of all trips in the Netherlands are by bike. That's an unbelievable amount when you think about it, 27%. But here's the interesting thing. Biking is expected to continue to increase. And that's why there are some changes in policies in the Netherlands now with regard to biking. It's not to get people on bikes, it's to make sure we can actually accommodate all those bikes. Now, I know this is Dutch, and I know you don't want to really get this, but this is, green is bike, blue is car, and red is public transit. This is 2004, 2006, 2010, 2011, and this is what they were trying to do in 2015. This is for a typical Dutch city. And the reason I want to show you, people always think about, oh, public transit, you know, we need to promote public transit and stuff. And the Dutch have really good public transit, but as you can see here, public transit still is only like 4% of all the trips. The majority of trips in the Netherlands even is done by car, but a very substantial amount is bike. And this is one of the things that I want you to realize. According to the Dutch and the way they think about the future of transportation, it's about bike, and it's to a lesser extent about public transit. But the only way they can keep people moving in cities especially is on bikes. And now here is just interesting, this is internal of the city and this is external to the city. And you see that externally public transit becomes much more important. St. Luke's design is completely wrong. It violates every single thing that the Dutch are trying to do in the thing. There's all kind of conflicts, there are all kind of issues that we should have designed a little bit better, no matter how much interesting it looks like. All right, so we talk about this first one. As a Dutch person, I had a tremendous advantage over anybody else because the Dutch manual on bikes was only available in Dutch. All right? So this was it, Ontwerpwijzer fietsverkeer, and darn it, they just finally translated it. So you can now all order design manual for bikes, the Dutch manual. Unfortunately, it does cost 150 euros. But is it 127, 147, whatever it is. But this now actually is available for people to buy, and it's actually sent to you. It's not a PDF and stuff. I'm going to the Netherlands over the summer, and I'm actually going to go there, and I'm going to see if I can buy a set of it, because I just want to have the manual. It's a lot easier than finding it anywhere else. All right. So what is in this manual? And it's really interesting. So this is, I just have all the chapters on here. The development of bicycle traffic, the importance of bicycle history, all this kind of good stuff, right? Cycle-friendly design, basic data, and all this is just kind of background stuff. And then after that, it goes in the design of the cycle network. One of the most important things, according to the Dutch, is it needs to be all connected. If your bicycle is not a network, but consists of little pieces, you're doing it the wrong way, right? Because it sends the wrong message to car drivers, it does the wrong things. It's better to start small and expand than to have little pieces all over the place, according to the Dutch. All right, so that's the first thing, the network. Then it talks about road sections, right? So road sections has a whole thing about junctions. Implementation, maintenance, furnishings, evaluation and management, and then the most important thing, the design sheets. It has this whole appendix with all these design sheets on how these intersections and how these road sections should look like, and it's really interesting to see those. So you can now go online and get yourself one. All right, here's what the basic approach looks like, because it's really, in essence, really simple. The first one is you separate bikes from cars, and actually all road users, based on speed and speed differential. If the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, you do not want to have the bikes on the same road. You cannot just have a bike path as part of the road. It's 55 miles an hour. If a car goes over a little bit, a bike goes over a little bit, you have a deadly accident. You don't want to do that. At that point, you need to actually separate the bike path from the roadway, and based on the speed, that separation has to be fairly large. Because if a car gets out of control at 55 miles an hour, they go pretty far. And you don't want them to interfere with the bike traffic that is right next to it. So I think that the distance is anywhere from a minimum of 10 feet to up to 25 feet that you have to be away from it. If you talk about an interstate, we're talking 100 feet. Right, so these are huge differences based on the speed differential. Bless you. All right, second one. You have to have a street design that visually confirms the speed. Boy, if we would start doing that, right? If I think about Broadway, right, and I go over the beautiful bridge, I want to go 55 miles an hour because that's the way it looks like to me. If I am on Myrtle and I'm going east, you know, there is no traffic lights for, I don't know, for a fairly long distance. I then get to Broadway where I all of a sudden have an intersection, but I haven't seen anything that tells me I shouldn't go faster than 35 miles an hour. As a pedestrian trying to cross Myrtle there quite a bit, I have these cars flying around the corner going 40, 45 miles an hour, and I don't blame them. You know, so the Dutch have a really important part, I think, is you have to have street design that visually confirms the speed limit. It's not just a sign is not good enough. It needs to be all this other kind of stuff. When I think here about Idaho and Maine, they make you not go 35 miles an hour, right? It's a much more confined street. Warm Springs, it's a much more confined street, even though it's big. Everything, all the visual signs that you get when you're on there is, I shouldn't go this fast. Right? So for the Dutch, that is really part of design. It has to, everything that I see as a car needs to reflect what the speed limit is. I need to feel uncomfortable if I go too fast. All right, then minimize conflicts. That's the first thing. And this is where St. Luke totally went wrong. I actually realized as a pedestrian and as a bicycle, they have created a couple of conflicts that were not necessary by the way they designed it. So minimize conflicts. Before you create a conflict, separate the users. You always want to make sure that the conflict happens in front of you, not on your side. Think about all these right-hand turns, right? Right-hand turn, and I now have to really move my face to see that there is a car there or that there is a bike there. The Dutch will not do that. The Dutch will actually make sure you separate them first so that you have to turn like this, so now I'm facing the conflict. A good example in Boise is Whole Foods. Whole Foods actually did it right, but then the implementation was just totally wrong. If you're on Broadway and you come south, you will see that there is this weird thing where as a car you're kind of going like this. And there's this paint that indicates that you go this, there's the bikes. They're actually separating me so that now if I turn into Whole Foods, I have to turn around, go like this. The space is actually correct. It's about a car long. I now face the conflict of the bike that is coming and the pedestrians that are coming. Unfortunately, the paint is all done. It's really not there anymore. Nobody understands this, so as a car who did this right a couple of times, I almost got sideswiped by a car who did it wrong. And I have video of all the people that are actually not using the markings correctly. Just because we're not, you can't blame a car for that, right? We're just not used to this kind of system, and you need to make it very simple. So, minimize conflict, separate users, and I'll show you a picture shortly, before conflict occurs, to have a conflict occurred right in front of you. Design so that it is clear who has the right of way. Earlier this session I said, if you have to educate people about your design, you messed it up. You know, in traffic, your design has to be so clear that people do not mess up. you have to have it designed in a way that it makes sense, that people know where to stop, that they know who has the right of way and who is supposed to stop. Many of our intersections are not like that. Many of our entrances into businesses are not like that. I'm going to use Whole Foods again. If I am driving on Front Street, the roadway, which is ACHD, right? The roadway, I can actually, no, it's the ITD? All right, so the roadway into Whole Foods, actually the pavement continues and they make this nice turn. Right? It's almost like the road continues into the private business. As a pedestrian who's actually walking straight, my pavement stops. And I have to wait for that car that's coming from behind me. That's the wrong way, right? We should have made it clear that, that as a car, you're actually crossing a pedestrian walkway, not the other way around. They're infringing on my space as a pedestrian. I'm not infringing on the highway, which is next to it. That does always make sure that it's clear who has the right of way. And then finally, make sure that there is space to not obstruct other traffic. So in the case of Whole Foods, again, it's a good example. You turn to the left, you are able to turn around. There's enough space here before you hit that conflict with that bike or the pedestrian to stop and not impede traffic. So Mike Lowrey this morning, does this make sense so far? All right. So Mike Lowrey this morning showed this picture. And I actually thought this was a really interesting picture. All right, so this is a street in the city where the speed limit is probably about 30, 35 miles an hour. Might even be lower than that. So at that point, you don't want to have the bikes on the road. You want to have, them separate. And then here's where you can see what a normal separation is. It's a couple of feet, right? It's not very much because the speed differential is not that much. Now, we're approaching a conflict here. So what do? You separate the bikes from the cars. Right? You separate them, create larger distance, so that this car now has to make a full turn and will face the traffic on this walkway straight ahead. There is no excuse for not seeing a bike. They are right in front of you on both sides, right? Then it's also very clear that the bike has the right of way. You see that because this pavement continues, and then, and I know this is not usual here, but in the Netherlands, they have these little shark teeth. And if the shark teeth are pointed towards you, you stop. That's the way it works. And they're very consistently used, and you never have to wonder about it. If there's shark teeth, you stop. That's it. And you see the same thing here, right? So a car that is coming from this street that continues here, first stops here, then they stop here again with the shark teeth, and then they can turn. So even though you have no idea where this is, or what you need to do, the whole road, the way the road is marked, makes it pretty clear that you know how to behave and what you're supposed to do. And again, this car, when it stops here, it's not obstructing this lane of traffic. Right? So those are the kind of design principles that have you can find all over the Netherlands. It's easy, it doesn't matter where you are, it should be clear to you. If the design is done right, you don't need to educate people because it should be clear. So I was going to talk about this for quite a bit, and then I realized that things in the Netherlands have changed a bit. So here is actually a book about, I had to add this because I wish we would use paint that would last on these roads here. I cross I cross Broadway in front all the time, and there is no paint that indicates to me that there is a walkway, and there is no clear point where a car needs to stop. So I looked at this here, and I had to read it. Unfortunately, this is not available in English, but it actually tells you what kind of paint to use, under what kind of conditions, and then how it will actually stay on. And you don't have to redo it again every year after the winter, right? But what was really interesting was this one. And it's kind of fun that you can't read this. But it's a totally new issue, and I will get back to telling you what this is shortly. So this is a word, it's called vergevingsgezind. And even for me as a Dutch person, it's a hard word to say. It's a long word, and I'm like, what in the world is vergevingsgezind? What in the world do they mean with that? I haven't been in the Netherlands, I moved there from '92, so this was really a new word for me. I'm like, okay, what is that? So then I started looking into it. This is what I spent my day yesterday on. So here is road deaths. So 2006 to 2016, this is fatal accidents with cars, fatal accidents with bikes. And the interesting thing is that fatal accidents with bikes have actually increased and continue to increase over the last couple of years in the Netherlands. Now, it's nothing near what it is here, but it has increased and it has really been bucking the Dutch. So then I looked at it. Here are the number of bike accidents in the Netherlands. So this is a map of the Netherlands with all the bike accidents. Okay, so here are all the accidents. Now, what do you think the major accident in the Netherlands will be? So these are bicycle accidents, accidents that a bicycle was involved in.
Bike collision?
Close.
With a pedestrian.
Also close. Anybody else want to try it? One bike. One bike. So here you go. All the orange one is one bike. These are people falling over, people running into things and getting injured. No relationship with alcohol.
At least deaths are just accidents.
No, these are accidents. These are just accidents, right? But it's interesting, right? What in the world is going on here? The biggest problem with bikes is bikes by themselves. It's not here like there's a conflict between cars and bikes. No, it's just bikes. And it blew my mind. I'm like, what in the world is going on? All right, so then Amsterdam. Bike capital of the world was Stockholm. It's the world's most dangerous, or it's the most dangerous place to bike in the Netherlands. Now, I have biked there. I can tell you it's absolutely true because there's so much stuff going on. It is a little scary place to bike. I'd rather bike in other places. So the reason that I showed you this, so this is the Dutch Institute for Road Safety Research that does this kind of things. Most dangerous city for cyclists and for pedestrians. So what is going on? So here is a map of downtown Amsterdam. Anybody ever been in Amsterdam? These are the canal houses and all this kind of stuff, right? This is the center of Amsterdam. In that center, about 400,000 people live, right? So here are, and this is hard to see, but if you see the number 12 there, and between 2012 and 2016, there were 12 deadly accidents, bicycle accidents in Amsterdam, right? But kind of surprised me, to be honest with you. But of course, if you know how many trips there are, how many people are on their bikes, who is on their bikes, the amount of tourists that are there, the street cars, all the kind of stuff that's going on, okay, maybe. Now, here are the number of accidents that involve one bike and one bike only. Right? 638 one bike accidents. Now, if they had all been in this area, in the center, I would have said those are all alcohol related, people going out and going home, but there's absolutely no pattern to it. And they have all kind of different GIS layers, and I typed them all in, and there is no relationship between that. It's all kinds of stuff. So what is that? Why do you think there are so many one bike accidents?
People on their phones while they're biking.
All right, that's one thing, all right? Smartphones. Smartphones have become a real problem. You think it's a problem with cars, yes, but it's also a problem with bikes. And with bikes, I do it sometimes. I'm on my bike on the green belt, and my wife calls and like, yeah, what do you want? You know, or my kid calls and I grab it, and I probably shouldn't. What else? That's the first one.
Are there e-bikes there and people are going a lot faster than they're used to?
There are e-bikes, and they are related to it, but it has nothing to do with the speed.
Is it listening to music?
No.
Is the infrastructure cracking failing somehow?
No, you would love the infrastructure, but there are some problems with the infrastructure.
Level of comfort?
Level of comfort. Okay. Why is that relevant?
They become complacent, so used to it, comfortable on the bike.
No.
Are there more riders?
Yes, there are more riders.
They're more older riders?
Yes, exactly. So what we see is we have more older riders that ride our longer distances because there are e-bikes. So my 75-year-old mother who now bikes all through the place because he has an e-bike, right? Well, my grandmother didn't bike. My grandmother couldn't, you know, by the time she was 70, she was not on the bike anymore. My mom bikes. My mom bikes 30 miles because she has an e-bike. But the capabilities of these elderly are not the same. So, here we go, smartphones and elderly on e-bikes, right? That's the reason.
They also have advanced smartphone connections now with e-bikes. So they're upgraded.
I'll get back to that.
Integrated.
I'll go back to that. Actually, see, this is a perfect transition. So the problem with bikes now is not just the infrastructure, right? And I'll get back to the infrastructure in a second. But the other problem is, how do you make bikes safe for a different kind of biking audience? So here is the recommendation. If I can find this, there we go. Yeah.
The Royal Dutch Touring Club, ANWB, wanted to improve the safety and stability of the city bike, a product used by millions every day. The e-bike is particularly popular among older road users, but also increasingly the choice of other users like commuters and secondary school pupils. E-bike safety statistics reveal that 72% of those injured in accidents involving an electric bike are older than 60. Interestingly, e-bike riders, especially the elderly, cover much greater distances than riders of standard bicycles. The ANWB is proud to present this outstanding new bicycle concept, the Lifecycle, a bike that can be enjoyed by young and old alike. A bike that is easy to adapt to the cyclist's lifestyle and physical limitations. A truly safe bicycle for everyday use. The Lifecycle's geometry and clever, innovative features give it groundbreaking safety and stability characteristics, and the logistics benefits of the one-size-fits-all frame will be greatly appreciated by both bicycle manufacturers and dealers. There is no need to produce, assemble, or stock different frame sizes and colors. One frame size fits all. The Lifecycle features a retractable seat post, which allow the cyclist to gain a firm footing before getting on and getting off the Lifecycle. The double stand automatically retracts as the cyclist pulls away. As soon as the Lifecycle reaches a speed of 5 kilometers per hour, the saddle automatically elevates to its present position. The Lifecycle offers all the benefits of an upright riding position, significantly reducing stress and strain on the shoulders, wrists, and neck. A low center of gravity provides better handling, better balance, and a more comfortable ride. When slowing down or braking to a stop in an emergency, the Lifecycle seat post and saddle automatically descend to the lowest position. This brings the ground within easy reach of both of the rider's feet. The built-in display indicates speed and battery status and features turn-by-turn navigation. A rear-view camera located in the rear light provides active feedback on traffic situations and approaching vehicles, so cyclists can turn safely without taking their eyes off the road ahead. The Lifecycle is equipped with direction indicators in the rear light and handlebars. The indicators allow the cyclist to signal turns to other road users well in advance of actually making the turn, while keeping both hands firmly on the handlebars. Customers can customize and order their Lifecycle using an online configurator that offers huge freedom of choice. For example, a basic bike for cycling to school, a trendy city bike for enjoyable day trips during the summer, a commuter bike for everyday use, or a stylish bike for getting around and carrying your groceries, a child, or both, or simply a trusty steed that you use for Sunday morning trips to the bakery. Next, the order is transferred digitally to the factory, where the bike is assembled according to the customer's individual specifications.
I don't quite get it. We should go outside and ride one.
So it's interesting, right? Because it was always about bike infrastructure, and now it is, wait a second, we have totally different users, and these totally different users mean that we actually really need to start thinking about the bike in a different way. And when I think about it, when it's slippery outside, I bike all weather, it doesn't matter, right? But if it's slippery, I would like that saddle to go down and I could put both my hands down or my feet down. The idea that you don't have to signal with your hand, yes, that's going to increase some safety issues, right? The rear view mirror, I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, so when we think about bike infrastructure, you think about who's using the bike, you need to start thinking about, okay, maybe we can make some improvements in that bike too. And this is really integrated design, right? Because it has all these capabilities of phones and all this kind of stuff that we now have that you can put in there. The newest model actually have things that tells you beforehand how much traffic there will be and stuff. It's mind-blowing, the kind of things that they're doing. All right, but besides that, what they are now thinking about is this vergevingsgezinde fietspaden. Right, these are bike paths that are forgiving. And things that I see here in bike paths that we do to make them safer, they are now considered a threat to safety. Right, so where we try to separate, we have a little elevation. There, no, because that's a potential conflict. So I'm going to show you some of these, which to me are just hilarious. But you know, so here's the first thing. So they found out that one of the issues that was happening is that the difference between the bike surface and the grass, there were a lot of people, especially when they're on their phone or they have not full control, they actually end up in the grass. And then the difference in height was too much and they can have a hard time getting back and they fall and there's your accident, right? So they started experimenting now with these different surfaces. So now they have this, they have the grass a little bit lower. Then they have this kind of transition layer. It's like in the road, right? Where you're getting off the road. Same thing that they're starting to do for bikes now, so that you have the same kind of things. They actually found that this was the best thing. This is artificial turf. So they actually have artificial turf next to the bike path now to prevent these one-bike accidents. And then this is a really interesting one. This is making sure that there's actually better markings on the street. They've tested different things. This kind of middle line, they're especially doing that now in turns. I don't know if your bike on the green belt and there's a sharp turn, the people that make the shorthand turn typically go all the way into the wrong side. Here, that line is not always in the middle. It depends on in what direction the path is going. So if the path is going this way, then it's a little bit more to the outside. If it's going the other way, it's a little bit more to that outside. So it doesn't actually indicate the center. It indicates where it is safe to be at that particular point in time. This is here, they're trying different things. They're just making sure that it's clear that you see that outside. And then here, this is actually fluorescent. So that when it becomes a little darker and it's harder to see these kind of things, you can actually see the edge of the bike path better. Again, this was not something that the Dutch worried about before. It was really about separating cars and making sure that those conflicts didn't occur anymore. Now it is all of a sudden about protecting bikes against themselves, right? Here's another, and here's actually, you can see that example, right? This is not in the center. It's actually off center. Even little things like this where you make the center lane a little bit lighter. And I think about the greenbelt where I have people walking, and people walking very often, they take like the whole thing. If there's a big center lane like that, it's less likely that they will actually be doing that. Of course, as a bicyclist, I don't really like paint on my bike path because it makes it slippery and all this kind of stuff. But, all right. Here's another one that's interesting. So here's another thing where they're doing, here you see the things on the side again, this kind of transition to make sure that people, when they get off the path, they don't fall over. Then, in order for them to make this transition, they actually made, so this is the width of the bike path, and here they made it a little wider so that you can see better, because they had to get through this, and I don't understand exactly what this point is, but this is 1.6 meters, so that is 5 feet. All right, so 5 feet is a safe transition. Now, you see this little thing here? When I was a kid, I remember being 10 years old and we went on a vacation, and for some reason I had the awkward habit to write right into them. Now I know I was not the only one, because they now actually have one that is on a little spring so that if you ride into it, it just gives way. Again, it's all about trying to make sure that these one-person bike accidents don't occur any longer. Here, this is one of my favorites. This is the smart bike path, where they call them smarter than a weatherman. So if the temperature gets below a certain point, the path is actually heated.
Group E is the group of the largest motor vehicles in the urban area, buses and trucks, which, although different in function, have a similar impact on the cityscape. Group F is the group of urban vehicles that have their own tracks. This makes their behavior more predictable. Think of trams, streetcars if you like. Now that the vehicles have been categorized, we need to order the city space in area types, which can then be allocated to and designed for one of these vehicle families. Who use parts of the city and how? Do they move slow or fast? And is that in an organized manner and direction, or in a more diverse way? This leads to four main types of cityscape. The first one being the pedestrian area, the parts of the city where walking is the dominant form of traffic, a shopping zone, or the place where people go to bars and restaurants. The speed limit here is 10 kilometers per hour. The second zone is the cycling area, with a speed limit of 20 kilometers per hour, also for racing. Fit in this category. In that case, car groups can be guest users. The third area is one that caters for the needs of the light motor vehicle. The speed limit will be 30 km per hour. Pedestrians have their own space, but there can be mixed use with cycling and cars. But again, car drivers will have to behave as guests. The fourth and last type of area is specifically for the motor vehicle group. Here, the speed will be 50 km per hour. Other user groups can be allowed in this area, but then in their own subspace. This goes for pedestrians and cycling. These different cityscapes will have to be connected in a traffic structure to be accessible. It is not necessary for each road user family to have its own specific network. Some mixing is possible after all, as long as it is possible for each road user group to reach their specific areas in a safe way. Some conflicts may arise when a desired through route would lead through a pedestrian zone. It may have to be diverted around it. On the other hand, this proposed system can solve current conflicts. Where there are crowded cycleways, the entire area could be designated as cycle space. Parking of vehicle families should only be allowed in their own zone. That will end parking scooters in a pedestrian space, for instance. This is still a thought experiment that would require quite a number of law changes and a whole different approach to urban design. But it is an interesting plan in which the spatial quality and the flow of different types of traffic would be designed at the same time. Easily recognizable zones will help people to know what behavior is expected of them in such a zone. This will help improve traffic safety as well as the quality of living. Since it builds on existing Dutch policies, even organizes those in a wider frame, it has a lot of potential.
So the reason I think this is interesting is because it's no longer thinking about these corridors, right? It's starting to think about the city as a collection of spaces where in certain spaces, certain forms of transportation are the most, it's designed for this kind of transportation. And then I'm not sure if I have it on this, or I don't want to show you all this kind of stuff because I'm running out of time anyway. This is what I wanted to show you. This is called a bike street. So this is a street that is designed for bikes, and the car is the guest. And so they have pedestrian streets where the bike is a guest, and they have car streets where the bike is the guest. So they really changed the design of the streets based on what is the predominant form of transportation. And then they have these signs. You know, I always love these little bike signs on the street, and I think that's the most ridiculous thing. That's how you make a bike sign, right? This is how you make clear this is a street designed for bikes, and everything around it again says that, right? It has the pebbles, it has different kind of things. It doesn't look like a fast street. That doesn't mean that a car can't be there, but it says car is the guest. So, a different way of thinking about transport. I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'm going to continue and keep on going. Thank you. Questions, comments? Yeah.
I do have to say, partly just a comment, but the observation is not a lot of helmets, right? Because if the infrastructure is safe, we know what we're supposed to do. It's not that wear your helmet,
Right.
you're going to be safe now.
Right.
And I think that's just an interesting perception difference. Or
Now, there is more discussion now about helmets, right? Especially with more and more people biking longer distances and more of these single accidents, right? The single bike accident. So there are now more people that are starting to talk again about bikes, or about helmets. So,
The
yeah.
last I saw, it's like about 1% of Dutch
Right.
people wear a helmet. It's minimal. Not even kids. It's not normal.
No. Yeah.
I know that a big problem, especially in Amsterdam, is bike theft.
Yep.
And I know it's growing here as well, but I know this is
But-
a little off of what you've been.
No, so bike theft is not, when I was in the Netherlands, bike theft was like, you didn't want to have a nice bike and stuff. But nowadays, if you have a nicer bike, you have a GPS in there, and now they have the electronic locks that actually on my phone tell me that I have locked up my bike, and it tells me where it is. So bike theft is becoming less and less of a problem. You also see less and less bikes just parked everywhere. There is more and more controlled parking. There's more and more people that are actually guarding the parking and stuff. So it's no longer as big an issue. But yes, I used to have students that said, "Oh, you don't have to rent a bike; you just grab one." Yeah, not quite. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Is it true that you have like bike bonds, from going from town to town, city to city? They have
So there's actually one in my previous presentation. I showed one which went from Nijmegen to Arnhem, which is it's about 15 miles probably, and it is a bike highway, right? It's a bike highway, and it's only bikes, and I don't know, it's like 15 feet wide, and it has beautiful lights, and it has art installations and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, they do exist, but to me that's the excessive infrastructure that you create at some point, right? That's really not what you start with. You start with all the other kind of stuff, separating and all this kind of stuff. But yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that the cycle track around St. Luke's is actually ACHD property, designed and owned by ACHD.
Yeah.
So be careful when you say St. Luke's did it all wrong. 'Cause
The location of and I'm not blaming anyone, but if you look at these simple guidelines, right? And I look at this thing with St. Luke, I'm like, oh, if you had just looked at these simple things about separating and doing this stuff, and you did it exactly the opposite way here. Think about it for a second, and and that's where I don't think we should adopt the Dutch way of doing stuff at all. But I think we should look at some of these bike guidelines because they do make a lot of sense. And there are things sometimes, and I walked around my school, the university, and saw a lot of stuff like, if we had just thought, it doesn't even cost money. We should just have thought about it in a slightly different way, and then it would have been so much better. And I know with ITD, they have this, at Whole Foods, there is this sign for Walgreens. And it's all according to code, because code said when there is a conflict, you need to have a view of sight. Well, they define the conflict as the car conflict, not as the pedestrian conflict that happens, 10 feet earlier, and now that sign is correct for the cars, but it's not correct for the pedestrians. So yeah, I'm not digging with St. Luke, but there are some things in that design that could have just been done so much better.
when we are concerned for safety issues, it's probably
Right.
the first time that there's actually been parking garages emptying out on the cycle tracks.
Right.
That's never really happened before, so we are
Right.
concerned and we are taking safety measures, warnings, whatever needs to be done, because people are shooting out of parking garages.
Yep.
And they've never done it and crossed a cycle track.
No, and I walked there this morning, right? So I walked over St. Luke, and I saw these people coming out of it, and then they did stop for the pedestrian or for the bike that's not there yet. But then the next time they had to stop and it's not their fault, because you get out of the parking lot, and in order for you to see what's going on there, you cannot stand here. You have to go all the way to the front. Well, now you're blocking. I think it's the pedestrian way, the sidewalk. Yeah, and it's like, should have thought about that for a second. We put all this infrastructure in there. We built this whole new thing, and we should have thought about it a little bit more. So. All right, thank you.